Happening now, we'd like to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world as we have hosts who are going to bring you the EdTech Situation Room for May the 3rd, 2017. My name is Wes Fryer, and I am happy to be coming to you live from Oklahoma City, where I am the Director of Technology at the Cassidy School, and a cherry pie is about to come out of the oven in 5 minutes that I think my wife is going to thoughtfully give me a piece of so I don't have to jump up. But if I jump up unexpectedly because the pie has not arrived, you'll know what happened. So I'm joined by Jason Neiffer, guru of all ed tech in the northern tier, really from Kansas north. He's the man everyone looks to. How are you, Jason?
I'm well, Wes. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing pretty well. We kind of got wiped out by exercise yesterday. Good thing. So anyway, a nap later and an episode of Mr. Robot later, and I'm ready for the show.
I'll do it. So good evening from Missoula, Montana, where it was, I think it had to be, I haven't looked yet, but it had to be over the upper 70s today. It was an absolutely beautiful day. The first really beautiful day we've had for 2017. So I'm glad that our weather, our very wet and cold springtime weather seems to be moving on. So I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual supplemental program located on the University of Montana campus, where we serve students from almost 200 schools a semester across the fabulous state of Montana. And in fact, today I was actually not at work. I was working on some dissertation research, and something happened today that distracted my attention. I had to kind of digitally jump into work. I was going to put together a breaking news bumper, but you're going to have to let me just improvise like shugga-gugga-guggung. There's breaking news in the ed tech world, and for those that have had to deal with it today, this is not breaking at all, but The Verge notes that Google Doc users were hit today by a sophisticated phishing attack. And although I don't know if I would call it Google Doc users, because honestly, it was probably more or less Gmail users that were hit, or actually any email user that was hit by this attack. I noticed this morning, late morning, that I had received 7 emails that look all the same from accounts that said, click here to open up a document. All of the emails were to an at, and I can't remember the name of the address, but someone that is on the Montana Tech Director listserv said it was a popular anonymous email service, and by the time I was able to get in and go to our e-discovery service to look at the email archives, we'd been sent a couple hundred of those across our program. And the thing that's interesting about this, I never clicked through to find out more about it. And I do have a fake Gmail account that I use sometimes to be able to do that. But essentially, it was a very sophisticated phishing attack that opened up a window, asked you to put in your Gmail or Google authentication process. That was all well and good, but it was kind of a legitimate username and password ask, unlike other phishing attacks, because it then asked you to authorize the installation of an application or script into your Google account that essentially gave the malicious script access to your entire email account, where it then replicated very quickly and very effectively. And I received a couple dozen of these today. My program, across program, received several hundred of these. And I can report from hearing from reports from schools across Montana that a lot of folks were hit by this today. I would strongly recommend, if you work in IT in a school district and you utilize Google Apps for Education, start with that Verge article, which does refer to other resources on how you might get rid of this in users, if anyone has that. And certainly, these are always great opportunities for you to start this discussion with users and teach folks more about how to be suspicious about email asks for your usernames and passwords, and being very, very suspicious of emails that are sending you shared documents that you're either recognize or expect. And I would say that it was interesting watching this play out today, especially watching the discussion board with tech directors across the state of Montana. But it took a lot of staff attention today to deal with this. We sent out 3 emails to our staff warning to not open up emails, and it's certainly something that is an interesting kind of sign of our times. So I guess, Wes, you as a tech director, did you see any of this activity today?
We did, and sent out an email warning folks about it, letting them know that they can report phishing from inside the Google application. Spam has its own little icon at the top by the labels and the trash and stuff, but when you click on the little arrow in the upper right corner of the message, you can say report phishing. And one of the things I had learned last week at the Atlas conference in California at the 3-hour cybersecurity workshop that I attended on Sunday was that schools who are doing phishing tests and sending false phishing messages are actually seeing much lower instances of users clicking, in part because people are reporting the phishing. And within your domain, ostensibly as well as within the larger Google universe, when you report those, it recognizes it and actually removes it from people's inboxes. So I did not receive it, but we did have users do that. And I'm curious, Jason, did they say, in addition to capturing somebody's credentials and replicating itself, does it do anything else? What do we know? What the payload or the actual bad stuff, malware that it might distribute or do?
I've not read anything to suggest that it did anything other than replicate itself. But that said, the scary part about this is that if you did go in and offer those credentials, it certainly could have downloaded a copy of your email, and that could be a treasure trove of doom in lots of instances. And of course, the scariest thing in regards to our institutions, educational institutions, is that we trade in student data all the time. And so having access to someone's email account or their Google account to get into Google Docs where there might be sensitive information stored is always a problem. And I don't think that information is independently valuable unless you're trying to then blackmail a district or an individual, and then it becomes a huge cluster of doom.
Well, I'll try to drop the link into the show notes, but one of the things that, I don't know if they talked about this at the cybersecurity workshop or if I read this, but there are now programs which will grab credentials and then literally scan hundreds of websites to say, oh, you logged in as this username, this password, I bet you used it somewhere else. And then boom, it just, is scripted to be able to do that. So one of the most important takeaways from that cybersecurity workshop that relates to this is two-factor authentication. And one of the co-leaders of the workshop had an incident at his school where they had, I think it was a laptop that was stolen and then credentials that were taken. But because they had two-step verification, that played in very importantly to what the lawyers actually said. And as they talked about it, a lot of cybersecurity is risk management, and you're trying to manage risk of breaches and data loss and all those kinds of things. So two-factor is a very important thing, and that's something else to ask people to do and let them know.
Absolutely.
So we are the EdTech Situation Room, and we're thankful to have Martin and Peggy with us in our live chat room. And there's Ben Wilkoff as well. So we've got representation from Montana, Arizona, and Colorado tonight for our 50th golden episode. Sure to be the most amazing 55, 60 minutes of your week, perhaps not. But there are some exciting articles to talk about. Microsoft had some pretty interesting announcements. And if you would like, as always, to access our show notes, you can find those at edtechsr.com/links. And we generally have links that we are not able to talk about, but all the ones that we do talk about are there. And of course, if you're listening to this on a recording, you can also access all the show notes and both audio and video archives of our show on edtechsr.com. So, Jason, we've got the fast breaking news we had to do about phishing. What else would you like to take us to just inaugurate this amazing golden episode?
Sure. Well, I think there's a lot of fodder here, and I'm actually curious to hear Martin Gracie's take on some of this stuff too. I may have to wait for a lunch where we talk more about my dissertation and do this, but Microsoft had an event yesterday, a Microsoft EDU event, I think is what they're calling them now, where they announced their competitor to the Chromebook and their competitor to Chrome OS, and some basic details. Microsoft will release something called Windows 10S. No word on what the S means.
I did hear about this. I watched a Bloomberg video, and it said it was a shout out to exclusive automotive, like it wasn't Mercedes, but it was another automotive company that has the S series. But they were talking about it as this other laptop, the $1,000 one. So is the S going to be on both the Chromebook and the $1,000, or is?
Well, that's the Chromebook alternative. Like that's where I think things get off the rails a little
bit. The $1,000 one is the Chromebook killer.
Yeah. So, well, okay. No, I have an argument against that though. So, I guess maybe the big headlines are Windows 10s is released. It's a scaled back version of Windows, and scaled back not in a way that's less functional, although I think it's de facto less functional. They're essentially adopting the Chrome OS model, where you get access to just two things. You get access to the Edge browser, and you get access to the Windows Store apps, of which there is a fledgling ecosystem of at this point, and that's the only thing that installs on there. And one of the things that's interesting about that to me is that they're apparently also making Windows 10s available to Windows Pro users. I don't know what Pro means. I'm assuming that means like Windows 7 professional and Windows 8 professional, Windows 10 professional users. So in other words, you can't upgrade from like a Windows 7 home OS computer to this whatever this new thing is, the Windows 10s is. You have to do it from another Pro computer. But at the same time, they introduced this new operating system. They also introduced the Surface laptop. So that goes along with the Surface tablets, the Surface Book, which is the Pro version laptop they've released two of, which will be my probably my next laptop, and now the Surface laptop, which is, and this is where it's a little interesting. It's a device that comes with Windows 10s. It starts at $999. It can get configured up to, I think it's $1899, which is the i7 16 gigabyte, 250. No, it's actually a 512 gigabyte hard drive to do that. But that device is built to come with Windows 10s, and as an optional upgrade, you can get Windows 10 Pro initially for free. And then if you don't want, or if you don't want it right away and want to upgrade later, I think it's like a $59 or $49 upgrade. So I think there's a lot of things to talk about here. Oh, and by the way, they also demonstrated that there was a lot of talk during the live event, which was early Tuesday morning on Mountain Time, that that we hear from our tech director friends in school districts that they need an easier way to roll out, and that other platforms, and of course by other platforms they mean Chrome, and the Chromebook phenomenon, have told us that they need much easier pathways to roll out large purchases of computers. And so you can create a thumb drive with the administrative information on it to set up one of these Surface laptops. It takes 2 or 3 minutes per laptop to load the information on. It joins your network and domain, and you have access to that. And in the same way that in a Chromebook in a managed environment, you log on with your credentials, it gives you your desktop back and whatever is installed on there. The same thing also happens with the Windows 10s devices as well. So I think there's a lot of things here. I think I want to start off with the notion of the minimum being a $999 Surface laptop. So I'm guessing by your physical reaction, Wes, that you find that price to be distasteful.
Well, reality says schools are going to need to look at, of course, total cost of ownership, but, price and what these things cost, and it's going to factor in significantly. I think for the first time in Apple's history, we saw them reduce the price of a device with this latest iPad. For the educational discount with Wi-Fi only 32 gig, it's at $300. Unless Microsoft is going to bring something else out, I have no idea how they're going to actually compete price-wise with Chromebooks.
Right.
We just got quotes from, we're working with a company called Trinity 3. I think they're out of Minnesota, and we purchased last year a number of Dell 11-inch 4 gigabyte Chromebooks and have been very, very pleased with those. And I think we got them maybe at $167 plus the $25 license. So we're looking at somewhere around $175 per laptop with a management license built in. I don't understand how $1,000 laptop can be competitive with that, if that truly is what they're trying to target.
Well, I've thought a lot about this because that's the first thing I did too. When I saw the picture, I had the live stream on in the background when I was working yesterday, and I saw the picture of it, and I'm like, wow, that seems like that would be a nice laptop. Like that's a nice metal plus cloth laptop that looked like it was an interesting design. But I don't think that that's intended to compete with the $179 Chromebook. That's intended to compete with the $999, $1299, $1499, $1699 Chromebook Pixel that was released by Google in 2013 and 2015.
Okay, and by the way, Ben is dropping in some things here that I had seen that laptop as more of the MacBook Air, MacBook Pro competitor, and he's saying that yeah, there are Windows 10s devices that start at $189.
Precisely, yep. And in
so,
fact, they're calling them channel partners, I think. And I heard June was when we're going to start seeing those devices released. And I hear HP and Lenovo are both in on it. I'd be really surprised if Dell didn't jump in on that too. But I think that the straight across competitor to the low cost Chromebooks is the $189, $289, $389, $489 books we're about to see. But the big caveat to this is, and even though I was willing to cut Microsoft a break because I've only played with a Chromebook Pixel and a Pixel 2 a couple of times, and it was a fabulous experience. And I'm sure if the Surface Book is, I'm sorry, the Surface Laptop, if it's competitive in that way, then great. But it depends on how snappily the OS runs on the low end hardware. And that's where the Chrome OS is dominant in this field. They have a tweaked out, scaled back version of Linux that scales really well to the super low end. And yeah, you can't run 13 YouTube windows on an ARM-based processor with 2 gigabytes of RAM on a Chromebook, but you probably can't do that on a $189 Surface laptop either. So I really, really want to install this on some medium and low end hardware and see what that looks like.
All right, so that USB, startup and restore sounds amazing, but Ben Wilkoff is pointing out it's still not cloud managed, and I think we need to be really careful to not just the hardware, because it's really about the software. I mean, we have different companies, pushing things as far as speed, and yes, there's the web, there's HTML5 and all the things that you can get on the web, but from the standpoint of schools, being able to manage your Chrome devices within the Google admin console, being able to, this is the thing that Apple, and you and Martin talked about this a little bit last time, the mobile device manage. Now, I wouldn't go so far as Martin said, complete fail. I'm not going to go there because it has gotten a lot better. And I'm in the place where we are managing Chromebooks through the Chrome admin console and a mobile device manager, and I'm on the cusp of actually moving to a different mobile device manager. I had heard early on that they're all created equal. That's not true. There certainly are differences as far as function and ease of use and the kinds of things that you put in front of teachers. But Apple, it is certainly true. They are still struggling to make that the same kind of seamless process it is, and it truly is from a Google standpoint. I mean, the best experience of this was last summer when I think we had maybe 120 Chromebooks, and I think there were 4 of us, but within the space of about 2 hours, we had all of those onboarded to our network and ready to go. And now, I mean, as we're working with this Trinity 3 company, they'll do a complete white glove deal for us. So they'll come provisioned on our network, labeled, the whole 9 yards. So I am just really reticent to get super excited about this, as we've seen in the cases of home broadband and also broadband for schools, and and the cell phones we've talked about, T-Mobile and Verizon, et cetera. Generally, competition is good. It's going to be good for the consumer. It's going to provide options. Some other things from the chat, Martin's pointing out that Windows doesn't even index files the way that the Mac does, and being able to use Spotlight and quickly find your stuff, there are big differences. And so just like with Android, people get excited, wow, look at this amazing 500 megapixel camera. No, it's not that, but it's like 12 or 16 or whatever. but it doesn't have, what's the app ecosystem? And it's gotten better for Android. And, I know that that's improved, but I definitely don't think Microsoft is there on the cloud management side for the devices, and they're not there in the app ecosystem. And this is something that Apple has done really well. And Google, frankly, now with extensions and all the things that you can add on into the Chrome environment. So I don't see this changing many people's technology orders this summer, but it's definitely interesting and exciting to see it happen. I want to ask Ben Wilkoff a question in the chat to see if he'll chime in. He says that this Microsoft event was one of the weirdest, let me quote him exactly. Yeah, it was the weirdest series of announcements I've ever seen. Did you get to see the announcements or watch video of it, Jason?
I heard the first 40 minutes of it, complete attention, and then I did half attention the rest of the time.
Would you characterize it as weird? I mean,
it wasn't like other Microsoft announcements. I felt like that they were. I felt like they were staging themselves as a scrappy upstart in the educational market, while at the same time trying to claim that they're the dominant player in K-12. And it depends on how you do that. But I didn't like it as a general announcement. But part of it is that like if you follow this over time, like it's an about face for Microsoft, right? Like a lot of the stuff they're doing here is doing stuff that they were criticizing Google for doing 3 years ago when they first started getting traction in K-12. But that said, the new leadership at Microsoft is different. Like they are much more nimble. They are willing to go down a pathway they wouldn't have gone down before. And I do think that's to their benefit. Surprising, but it's to their benefit.
Well, I was going to put this in the chat. So I was for my quote for it was fun to listen to you guys last week. I think that there's a host of issues that come to play for schools when we talk about the educational lens for this. And certainly, where you are as a technology department with your expertise and with imaging and with being able to re-image machines, and where your users are, right? Because if you are an early adapter user of technology, you may not have nearly the issues, moving from a Mac device to a Chromebook, to a Windows device. But as we were discussing this announcement today, there are a lot of issues to consider, and I'm excited to see them certainly stepping up on the imaging side, because that's been a real challenge for us. I know there's a host, and you mentioned the Fog project, and there's several other kinds of things. But even with Windows 10, with the new laptops we purchased last summer, the ID was in the chip, and so we'd used Semantic Ghost and things like that, and we were just having to do the restore. But this is a key thing that ties back to our first topic of cybersecurity, and that is being able to completely wipe what Chrome calls a power wash, where you completely take everything off of your system and you have a pristine copy of your operating system. That is a really important thing for schools and for home users to be able to do. And I remember way back in 1998, I think, when I was in a Windows 95 computer lab in Lubbock, Texas, we were using Symantec Ghost, and it seemed like a nuclear option. But when you have machines that were running slow and things were happening that were wonky, the easier thing was you had a good, clean image of your operating system with your programs, and you put a 3.5-inch floppy disk, remember that, into the drive, and you ran a batch file, a script, and it pulled it off, and it took an hour, a couple hours, or something like that. But then you had a whole lab that was completely blown away. Now there's imaging software that you can just do that remotely with. But that kind of function that used to be more of an IT, really, really geek thing, I don't know how many times I've had to completely restore, our iPhones at home to their default settings and things like that. So there's a lot of chatter in our chat. Hey, it's great to have a bunch of folks in there tonight.
Well, I will say one other thing related to this, and then we can pull in some comments from the chat room. My understanding is that this can be installed on any Windows computer. It just depends on, and I'm sure it's not unlike the Chromium OS installs like Cloud Ready. It probably doesn't support all hardware universally like most Windows 10 installs do. I don't really understand how that works yet, and I really wasn't able to find anything that gave me a true indication of what that looks like. But I have reached out to some sources I have at Microsoft. I'm hoping to figure out what a download of Windows 10s looks like, if that is truly what I thought it was going to be. And then I want to get installed, and I want to see if I can utilize this platform to be productive. And I'll tell you, it took me a little while to figure out how to be productive in Chrome on a Chrome OS device. But the bottom line is that I figured it out because of how advanced the Chrome plugin architecture was, and now that Android apps are available with the massive Android app universe, my Chromebook that allows me to install Android apps is an amazingly functional device. And so I could, with every application except maybe one or two, easily get away with 97% of what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I'm an advanced technology user that needs technology to do my job in the Chrome environment. And the Edge browser is fast and speedy. There are some decent apps in the Windows Store. I hope that this sparks innovation to make that a real reality, that Windows 10s can be a real reality as a productive operating system.
One of the other things that's going on in the chat is talking about Minecraft. And I guess one of the announcements is that Minecraft Education Edition is free for a year. And I'm glad to see that. I actually shared at lunchtime today an hour-long webinar, which Peggy was able to join, for librarians in Florida, all about Minecraft in the classroom. And we have the older Minecraft EDU licensed version, which is very different. And Microsoft's pricing has been just horrible for schools, basically, in terms of an annual subscription and how much you would have to pay on an ongoing basis for each user, et cetera. So I think that's exciting. And Peggy just dropped the link to those slides from today. We haven't played with the new Minecraft Education Edition. So it's exciting to see some things, coming out of Microsoft. We have a Microsoft store here in downtown Oklahoma City. I'm actually interested to go see this hardware. What I'm also interested in is, can we Hackintosh it, right? Oh, did I just say that on a documented webinar? I think I did. Interesting little sidebar. If you'd like to read some posts that were attributed to a fictional character, you can search my blog for Sherman Nicodemus, because there were some times where I was having to write some things and not wanting to publicly attribute that I was actually, I was hacking my device. But seriously, when we look at the Mac, we need a device that has a security slot to have a security cable on it. That's been very important for us in our environment. And, having a $1,000 or less robust machine that, has an Intel, not this, what is this thing, an A7 processor, whatever that's in my MacBook. The power of that looks very attractive, but it doesn't run Mac OS. So I think this is going to be something interesting to check out and see. But from my standpoint, I'm being called in on the Hackintosh. Yeah, we still have what was that? A Dell Mini 10. We got a little purple version. It was a 10-inch, and we can hold down whatever the Alt key and boot it into Mac, boot it into Windows. Hasn't been a popular device at our house though, so it's sitting on a shelf.
I can imagine. I am interested. I think this is an interesting move on Microsoft's part. But the bottom line is that if it's not a good experience in the sub $500 realm, I've seen a lot of advertising about schools that have adopted things like Surface 4 Pros school-wide. And that's awesome. And if your school can afford that, that's great. But that's not the reality of a lot of the schools that I work with, and a lot of schools that, have limited or almost no funding for technological purchases. So I'm hoping this becomes a viable alternative. But I do think that this does ultimately create some boom for the Chromebook crowd, because it does start to have people thinking about more. Do we need the full operating system to be able to compute in a meaningful and a productive way? And I think I've proven to myself that you don't need to. But interesting how that will play out. So,
all right. Well, there are a bunch of other articles. I want to take us to this one from Business Insider, which, by the way, I just realized on the iPad you can't read a Business Insider article in Safari when you have an ad blocker on. So we're seeing this happen. Some websites are really getting to be pretty serious about saying you must play our ads if you're going to see our content. So this is an article from Matt Weinberger on April 23rd, and the title from Business Insider is "The Smartphone is Eventually Going to Die. This is Mark Zuckerberg's Crazy Vision for What Comes Next." And so Zuckerberg shared at the Facebook F8 conference out in San Jose this 10-year roadmap for where social media is going to go, and really where VR is going to fit into this, and where they see social as well as the workplace fitting in. Jason, do you agree with Zuckerberg's idea that we're going to be a world without screens, and it's going to be science fiction, and we're going to have glasses and stuff's going to be projected on our eyes, and I guess it reminds me of Elon Musk's new enterprise, which we may have mentioned on the show, which is this Neuralink, I think is what it's called, and they're working on the brain, computer connection.
Right.
I don't know. I guess the bottom line is Facebook going to cash in on their Oculus investment? That's what Microsoft's trying to do with their Minecraft one, right? So Facebook hopes they'll do the same thing with Oculus.
Well, I always find it interesting when the future is screenless, because it feels like to this point in the last 15 years, the future is always about everything being a screen, right? Like they had massive surfaces all around the house, everyone trying to hack their mirrors to add the weather forecast into it. And, it seemed like everything was a screen as opposed to having, nothing be a screen. But I think the phenomenon here that may give us some guidance is that people are becoming more and more interested in smaller screens and personalized screens. And it's not that everyone shares a massive screen in your home. It's that everyone has their own screen, and they're using that to engage in media and to go onto social media and to, essentially engage in the world through those devices. If that's true, I think it does make a lot of sense then that part of Zuckerberg's long-term vision here is a play for the smallest of screens, the ones that you don't see at all, the ones that directly beam information into your receptacles. I think that the answer probably isn't the Oculus answer, right? Like I think the virtual reality is probably going to succumb ultimately to augmented reality. That's kind of what Mr. Zuckerberg's suggesting here, is that that it's somewhere. It's not that you're lost completely in an environment, that you are engaged somehow as part of your daily life. And so it probably looks more like augmented than it does like virtual.
Well, and the term he's using, I guess, or they're using in the article, is mixed reality. So this is a mixed reality world. And I think that's really reasonable. I've wanted this in professional development sessions or teaching students too. Like, let me see how overloaded and overwhelmed you are right now with a little virtual meter, over your head. Or, how much past experience do you have with with Seesaw or with Minecraft or whatever it is that we're talking about, and being able to look out on your class and see a virtual representation of that. When my wife and I were at this Atlas conference in California this weekend, or last week, we were able to Monday night see a live broadcast of the TED 2017 conference, which happened last week in a series of different evening presentations. And one of the first speakers on the Monday, this was like simulcast into theaters. I think at Vancouver was where the live event was. And one of the speakers was an artist who brings up representations of technologies in the future with the idea of trying to get us to have an experience and then think about what that looks like. Well, the one she showed about drones, you've probably seen some things like this where, the camera is seeing from above, and you're able to see little above each person, their identity, because facial recognition has ID'd them. And maybe there's a color, based upon, are they a threat? Are they on the watch list or something like that? So there's definitely, security sides of this that there's a segment of our population that is very interested in. But I like that idea of a mixed reality world in the same way that I like the term blended learning, right? You are working, Jason, in a 100% virtual environment, with the exception of a few site visits and things like that, but it's pretty much all online. A lot of schools are now working in a blended environment where you have a learning management system, you're using a tool like Google Classroom, or you're using Seesaw for portfolios, and it becomes this extension of the classroom. And so I definitely think we're living there now, right, with our phones with us, and the ways that they exert the powerful draw upon us, and how much information and interaction we have with our social circles. This idea of a mixed reality world doesn't sound too far-fetched, but I think it's interesting. They show what looks like a Warby Parker, or looks like Buddy Holly glasses, with black rimmed glasses. And Peggy mentioned in the chat that Google Glasses didn't seem to go very far, but I would say that was just kind of too out there, and it was just glaringly obvious that you were wearing those. And so as these technologies become more embedded, and you look like less of an outlier and more like a normal person, perhaps they won't be rejected as much by society as folks are using these.
Right. Well, and that's where the HoloLens from Microsoft. There are hundreds of smaller companies that are working on, some version of that, and kind of a mixed or augmented reality phenomenon. And I think that's probably better because and if for no other reason than I think if anything, we're experiencing a counter movement towards virtual reality, and not VR as a consumer product, but virtual reality is a broader philosophical concept. And so I definitely think that's heading in that particular direction.
Hey, I'm typing this in, but Ben or Martin or Peggy, if any of you want to jump in the show. I guess Ben has actually, he wants to break him out. I was about to say he's donned his Google Glasses just for tonight's show, but he still has his copy. Were you
a special 50th anniversary Google Glass showing? So
Felix Giacomino loaned me a pair of those for a while, and I'd used them, but yeah, it was a little bit too far on the bleeding edge. So
I wore a pair around for 2 hours at a conference a couple years ago, and I mean, again, it was interesting and it was cool, and I still think there's something there. It's just that Google didn't want to give it the time to reiterate, and they took a lot of public perception issues too. I mean, you may remember the glass hole movement, and a lot of people criticizing folks with glass, and then of course, every idiot that was, like walking into the street because they were busy kind of looking in the upper right-hand eye of their corner of their eye, and I'm sure it would have reiterated appropriately, but the reiteration is going to happen in private now.
Martin also dropped in a good point on the chat that glass did go somewhere. It's just not necessarily where the team thought or where we might have thought it would go as consumers. It's a hit in medicine and high-tech manufacturing. One of my favorite Google videos, there's a virtual tour that, what were they called? Glass Pioneers or something. Google selected different teachers to adopt, and he went to CERN, which is in Switzerland, which is the Hadron Collider, where they accelerate particles and crash them into each other. And so he's able to take his students on this live tour. So yeah, I mean, the march of technology, rarely do we fully anticipate in advance where things are going to go and how they're going to all play out there. But yeah, that was an expensive experiment for those people that dropped the money on those.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, where do you want to take us next, Jason?
Well, let's go ahead and talk about actually, I just wanted to mention this for just 1 second. I put an interesting link into a Kickstarter project. And of course, Kickstarters are a great place to throw money that you don't need or ever want to see again. So, but this is an interesting phone. It's called Jelly, the world's smallest 4G smartphone. They were looking for $30,000 to launch, and they've raised $235,000. And essentially, the Jelly is a modern Android smartphone running the latest Android OS or Android Nougat, Android 7.0, and it has a 2.3-inch screen. And otherwise, the specs of it are fairly advanced. They would be equal to maybe a mid-range phone, and the phone itself retails for well under $200. And the reason why I mention this is because I think it fits within this discussion of for a while, everything was going to get bigger, right? And it's not, right? Like laptops have kind of stalled out at 11, 13, 15 inches. You'll still find the occasional person that will carry around their 17-inch Alienware laptop that weighs, 143 pounds, that requires 2 power supplies to load up. But it's smaller, thinner has been the general phenomenon. And I actually, an older brother of a former student of mine is a fairly prominent Silicon Valley former CEO and investor, and I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he talks about quite a bit about how he really liked moving towards the tiny phone. He talks about the iPhone SE as being a real revelation for him because it has all the modern specs of a cell phone, but it's a smaller screen. He feels it's a more personal experience, but also he feels like that he doesn't feel like he's tempted to work on the phone because it's big enough to be able to do everything he wants to do. He uses it for connection and entertainment and pictures and music and entertainment only. And so that notion of, I think we're still struggling with, or kind of going back and forth with what the ideal size of things are. That I think is an interesting piece. So I know the answer to this because I know your OS preference, but are you in the market for a jelly phone, Dr. Fryer?
Well, I was looking at going to Vietnam this summer, and I have pulled out for various reasons. And at that point, I was going to find out what your burner phone recommendation or whatever was for, going international. So really not. Yeah, I'm not in the market. But to connect this back to the Mark Zuckerberg article about the future of where mobile is going, he talked about, and I didn't see the broadcast, I just read articles, but he talked about this idea of ubiquity in connectivity. We see Google as well as Facebook making investments to blanket the world with connectivity. And, the idea of that high-speed connection just, being there at all times, and the devices becoming very affordable. And that is what we see happening in India as well as China and other places, and I'm sure Africa, and there's probably people can speak to this a lot better, but price does matter. And so you can't just, these smartphones and devices that are very expensive have pushed the market, but that's not where consumers are going to stay, and especially large swaths of the global population, that's not going to be able to afford a $500, smartphone. This is a big deal, and this isn't exactly connected to it. But I'm going to be learning about Raspberry Pi. I've not played with Pi before, and this idea of this microcomputer and what you can do with it. This is an important space for students to be experimenting and dabbling and tinkering, because the connected world is not, well, far be it from me to have a crystal ball and tell you what's going to happen politically in our, charged environment of North Korea and French elections and all these kinds of exciting things that are happening. But, barring a global Armageddon that takes us all off the grid and, back to the dark ages. We're going to stay connected, and there's just going to be more and more people online, and the bar is going to continue to be lowered in terms of entry for who gets to participate in the global conversation and the global access, not just access to content, but the ability to interact, to purchase, to, have your life change transformatively by your access to it. So I think jelly is pretty cool. I'm glad you dropped that in.
And, and I should also say, buyer beware on any Kickstarter project. I've never had a project straight disappear on me before, but I would say of the maybe 10 or so projects I've backed, I've been disappointed in probably 6 or 7 out of 10. And it's a wonderful, interesting model, but it is fraught with peril. And there have been lots of instances where Kickstarter projects just evaporate and the money goes away with it. So certainly don't expect, or don't take our discussion today to be an endorsement of this product.
That's right. Hey, I think Ben Wilkoff is actually getting his glasses charged up, so I'm going to DM him the link in case he wants to jump in and do a 50th golden anniversary appearance, the first time with glasses on. And by the way, Martin and Ben were both early adopters in that Pioneer program, so that's pretty cool. That says something about our audience here for EdTech ASR. All right. Well, I think I would like to take us to two connected articles. One, I think you dropped in, Jason, from Recode from April 29th, the uproar over enroll.me, selling user data to Uber shows most people don't understand ad-based business models. And then the article, it's number 4 right now in the show notes below the Zuckerberg article. This is Lifehacker on April 25th, how to secure your online accounts by revoking access from third-party apps. And so this was a article that it got a lot of attention, and the company that it focused on, Ben, I just DM'd you the link there, is this company called Unroll. And what it allows you to do is take stock of how many different apps and websites you have given access to your accounts, and then unenroll you from those. Oh no, actually, is that what that does, or is this the email? I think it's
it does exactly that. You can put in your email address. It'll tell you where you have accounts. It will allow you to basically
cancel your access.
Cancel, delete those accounts. Yep.
Right. Okay. And so the controversy was that this company, shocker, has been using data which apparently is anonymized and is in their terms of service agreement, and they have been selling that, to make money. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen, from Aurora, Colorado. Is that right, Ben? With Google.
Well, I live in Littleton, but I work in Aurora. You keep going with your story. I just wanted to be able to present. So I'm getting it charged up. It's been at least 6 months since I've had it on.
It's super great that you have the charging wire on there. I think that actually adds a lot to it. It gives you more of a...
Basically, you could tell us that you are an early adapter with Elon Musk and Neuralink, and that is actually, connected to the brain stem.
Well, and believe it or not, I wrote it into a school-based grant, so I didn't have to pony up the $1,500.
Nice.
It was a video capture tool for classrooms, so you could see the point of view of teachers as we were capturing from like Swivel and other video capture. So you had like student perspective and you had teacher perspective of the video, and so that's what we used it for originally, and then it just became kind of a personal device after about 1.5 years. So
yeah, and if you all don't know, by the way, Ben and his team, and that was in Denver Public Schools, just have done amazing work with, self-reflection and building a community of trust and being able to share video and all the ways that you can use these tools like Swivel. Martin wants to know why you chose the blue, though.
The blue was absolutely my favorite. I absolutely love the blue. The thing that I miss the most is I broke my my sunglasses. They used to have these sunglasses that would just twist into it, and I just wore them as sunglasses for about 1 year and just absolutely loved it. But they broke, and I was like, I can't find these sunglass inserts anywhere. And you look online and they're like $100 now. They're like super rare or whatever. So at some point I'll probably figure it out. But anyway, you ask for the golden episode. I felt compelled. So.
Awesome. Well, so back to our little story about Unroll. I had tweeted out to people, hey, have you used Unroll? Just wondering, legitimate wise, is this good? Because the service sounds like an appealing service. I have, many of us as early adopters have gone into all kinds of websites. We've set up accounts. We may have used OAuth, which we talked about in a I don't know how many episodes ago, but that's where you use your account credentials, like with Google, to log into something else. And there's actually security concerns that some people have written about. And so it sounds like a good service, but I wasn't personally shocked to go, oh my gosh, they're using anonymized data and selling it. Jason, did this shock you and cause you to immediately, drop your Unroll account, or how do you respond to these?
It did not shock me, but I do think that the CEO had tweeted out that like a fake apology, basically, that I'm just shocked that people didn't understand that we were using their data in this way, or that I'm shocked that they didn't understand this process, and I'm saddened by this fact. And the bottom line is that we have to be more savvy than this. I mean, like I don't think anyone should be surprised by this fact either. There is no free lunch on the internet. There's There are, you know, and if there is a free lunch, chances are it's not going to stick around for very long because they're going to run out of venture capital and have no way of making money, and then the service goes away, and that does you absolutely no good either.
Okay, but let's mention Mastodon, right? We didn't talk at length about this, but an exciting social network that is FOSS free and open software, very Twitter-like, TweetDeck-like, and anybody can run an instance. So, you know, to your point, it is true. Someone is going to pay. Someone is going to pay for that server to be online. You know, we do have things like Patreon and ways that people are funding things these days. But especially in terms of the big social networks and the things that are attracting tons and tons of people, you know, we are the products. We've said this before, and that's a good digital citizenship line if you haven't shared that with your students to have them think about, when are you the product? On Instagram, on Snapchat, on Facebook, on any of these platforms, Twitter, that you're not paying for your data, the ability to advertise to you. All of those things are being monetized.
Absolutely true.
My last thought on this enroll deal is, from a security standpoint, it is important for all of us to take stock of our passwords and what we've used places. I think I'm up to 157 different accounts now on my password manager, and it's becoming normal. One of the things I heard at this conference for IT departments that we're going to start doing is using the LastPass manager for Teams, because that we've done Google Docs and some other things, but we've got a whole slew, right, of passwords and things like that, and we want to selectively share those. I mean, everybody doesn't get access to everything, but being able to do that is it's important. And so to the issue of enroll, you know, if you've had that password that you've used for years, it's out there in the wild, right? I mean, almost certainly it's out there. Go to the website, Have I Been Pawned? And we can drop that one in the show notes again. I think we've mentioned it. And it is it's like a public service, but the creator has taken the databases of hacks and identified whether your just email account, your password as well, are out there. And you know, my main Gmail was involved in both an Adobe hack and a LinkedIn hack, and we need to be aware of those things. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, be aware of these programs that hackers are using, which will go scan through hundreds of sites and say, oh, you know, I just got Ben's password that goes with this email account. I wonder if he used it on any of these other 300 or 400 different sites, and then being able to compromise those. So. There it is. Thank you, Peggy. All right.
Well, it appears that we are at 8:54.
Oh my gosh.
That went quick, didn't it? It's probably time for our Geeks of the Week. So, Wes, I'll go ahead and get started. So I want to share an app this week that I'm only getting started with, but I'm surprised how great it is. It's called Google Trips. And as I've talked about on the show, I am traveling to Europe for 10 days in June. I'm going to hang around in Sweden to hang around with the family of a foreign exchange student that is coming to our house in the fall. And what I plan to do is to plan the trip now. Like I usually print out a 10-day calendar, and I start to put dates in and times and things. Well, Google Trips recommended me by a friend, and I downloaded it on my Android phone. And the first thing that happened when I loaded the application was it said, "Oh, you have a trip to Sweden in June, don't you?" And I'm like, "Oh, you know me already, Google Trips." And as it turns out, it had all my airline reservations in it. I had already made one hotel reservation. It also appeared in the trip. It also spotted my airline flight to Isti at the end of June. So it really wants to help me plan for my trip to Austin in late June. So that's awesome too. But it reminded me a lot of grabbing a travel guide like A Lonely Planet, or maybe one of the wonderful Rick Steves books on traveling to Europe. It provides things to do, places to stay, reviews based on Google's extensive archive. They'll send you out to other review sites, and so far I'm really liking it. I've only spent probably an hour in a total just kind of playing around with the trip that it knows I'm taking to Sweden in June. But I think it's one of, like, if someone is going to trade on your data, like our good friends at Google do, I want it to benefit me. And one of the ways it benefits me is that when it goes into my Gmail account, it knows an awful lot about me, and it can help me plan that trip. So Google Trips, so far, wonderful application, iOS and Android.
Sounds good. Well, Ben, we'll put you on the spot here in a minute for a Geek of the Week. If you, I have confidence you can come up with something, but I'll go with mine. This is the Clips app for iPhone, and this is something Apple announced probably about a month or so ago, maybe 2 months. I don't know. It's been this spring, and it's like, well, do we really need another video app? But as they typically do, yay! I'm waving my Apple flag. Apple is just on the forefront of technologies that take you further. So the thing that's so cool about the Clips app, it doesn't have its own social network for hosting and sharing video. You do that on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. But when you record a video inside the app, it will analyze your audio. And when you tap the little comment speech bubble at the top, it does an automated speech to text, and the stuff says it works in 36 different languages. Now, I'll say this, I demonstrated it day before yesterday for our middle school faculty. And in my testing right before we started, I tried in Spanish, and it was so embarrassing. I would have been just like horrified to do this in front of a group and have what came out, because I don't know. I tried to load Spanish and get that to work. So I haven't gotten the multi-language side of it to work, but I put a link in to a little goofy video I made at the Atlas conference. Shout out to Elaine Wren, who is a fellow Apple Distinguished Educator out at the Echo Horizon School, and also Sam Patterson, he is like off the charts creative with Waka and his puppets that he does. Anyway, they are doing some great design thinking and design challenges for students, and they use puppets to introduce these to kids. Anyway, they said, represent your learning. Here, you're designing cars. This was a design challenge, and one of the choices was to do Clips. So she encouraged me to do that, and that's my encouragement to you. Download the Clips app. You have to have a relatively new iPhone, and I think you do have to be running iOS 10.2, definitely iOS 10. And then experiment with the speech to text. You will play it and pause and then just tap on the text, and then you can edit it, as Siri often, gets some words wrong and you need to adjust things. So from an accessibility standpoint, Jason, with virtual learning, that need to provide video that folks who are hearing impaired are going to be able to listen to. I don't know that that's going to revolutionize it tomorrow, but this is a good sign of where the technology is moving with speech to text and accessibility. I will pass it to Ben.
Yeah, and I would echo the Clips app is pretty amazing for that speech to text. I mean, I've used it a number of times, and it is spot on. If you even talk at a reasonable pace, it is just beautiful. The one thing that I struggle with is that it does square video rather than 16:9, which is what I prefer. Like even on an iPad, where you would think if you turned it into landscape that it would, nope, that just doesn't work. So Clips works on an iPad just fine. It just only makes square in portrait. So anyway, that's how that goes. But you inspired me. I had a couple of options in the back of my head, but I ran across possibly the best video editor on iPad that is absolutely free and does not have any in-app purchases, called Pocket Video. And so Pocket Video is a video blogging app, and because I'm just on the Hangout on my phone, if somebody can grab the link and pop it in there, that would be great. But Pocket Video does a whole bunch of things. The coolest thing that it does is it lets you add reaction GIFs, as well as images to annotate. It lets you draw on the video as it is happening, where you're actually annotating the video itself. And then it lets you also do reaction videos to YouTube videos that already exist. So you can pull in YouTube videos that currently exist and react to them as they are playing, and it will capture you just like any of your favorite YouTubers, right? But you can have kids, reacting to a piece of content that they're learning about, pausing it, reacting in video form, like just tons of stuff. And the fact that they're not charging anything for this app makes it even more interesting to me. So Pocket Video, I just sort of ran across it because I was looking for a better video editor on iPad. Lots of really cool stuff. You can add music, and I feel like it's what iMovie could be if it wanted to be more complex. But I'm really excited about if you've ever watched Idea Channel, the PBS show on YouTube. It's where they put like up in the top corner, you've got, you know, like a reaction GIF or like something that goes deeper into the topic. Like you just search for them and pull it in, and then you say how long you want it to be there. And I was just like flabbergasted. So go and try that out. Pocket Video, super duper cool.
Wow, that is fantastic. Well, as many of our shows can be with the Geeks of the Week and things like that, we've got some things that I'm anxious to give a try to. So I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, when we had Beth Holland on. In my excitement to end the show, I didn't even give us a chance to say where we're from. So we'll wrap up with that. Ben, you want to start? Where can people find you and connect with you online?
Absolutely. So I'm Ben Wilkoff. I work for Aurora Public Schools, and you can catch me at BH Wilkoff on Twitter, and Learning is Change on the blog.
All right, Jason.
You can find me on Twitter at TechSavvyTeach. I also blog for the Northwest Council for Computer Education at blog.ncc.org, where I am the Tech Savvy Administrator in Residence. And then my day job is that I help run the Montana Digital Academy, montanadigitalacademy.org, and we're always cooking up interesting and new stuff on ways to deliver digital learning to the students in the state of Montana.
Awesome. And I'm Wes Fryer. My blog is speedofcreativity.org. I'm W Fryer on Twitter. And you can find my Mastodon link if you'd like to join the early adapters or adopters there by going to about.me/WFryer. All of my notes from the Atlas conference last week are available in Google Docs, and you can get to those from the shortened link, wfryer.me/Atlas17. That's ATLIS17. But the place you really want to go is edtechsr.com and click the link for tonight's show, where we'll have all of the show notes, and you can also link back to the articles that we did not touch on. I want to say thanks to Ben, and thanks to Jason for joining us live. Thanks to Peggy and Martin for joining us on our chat room, or in the chat room. And we want to encourage you to come back, because we're normally here on Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain. And if you've got any feedback for the show, anything you'd like to hear us talk about, or guests you want to suggest, perhaps you'd like to nominate yourself as a guest, you may do that. And you don't have to show up with Google Glasses. But thanks for tuning in to our 50th anniversary show, or 50th episode, I guess. And we look forward to 50 more with you on the EdTech Situation Room.
Have a great night.